Welcome, everyone, to the 87th Fireside Chat. We're back again with Tom Campbell and a great group of people today. Thanks for joining. We're going to start off with Michael Sagansky. You're the first question, Michael. Go ahead.
Awesome. Okay. Thank you. Somebody recently in the My Big Toe Discord community asked me a question that I did my best to answer, but it really tested the limits of my knowledge and experience. So I think I was able to help that person, but I figured I would try re-asking his question here to see if you, Tom, can provide additional insight. We had a lengthy discussion and went back and forth quite a bit, so I'll do my best to try to condense the essence of his question here. He has had dissociative experiences that is making him question and try to understand his true nature. He agrees that fundamentally he is consciousness, but he is trying to understand that more deeply. He has had experiences as just a witness, which seem to him that pure awareness is more fundamental than any choice making or free will, because without a VR to interact in, there doesn't appear to be any choices to make. Yet I know that MBT ties free will and consciousness as two sides of the same coin. You can't have one without the other. So in some of his words to explain his experience more precisely, he says, "It seems like I can untangle myself from my entire existence here and separate from my structure of mind entirely. All I felt at my base during my experience was just a witness. I didn't experience choice or a need to do anything. I was mostly empty and it felt like an experiential truth. When I dissociate, my body moves on its own and it has thoughts on its own. Hence the popular meditation of watching your thoughts come and go as separate from yourself. Now I realize that everything like my personality, human mind, and thoughts are not me. Yet as an empty witnesser at my base, I don't know how I would make decisions from that point. How can I tell what aspect of my nature is making a decision versus the data stream interacting with me or feeding me my sense of self?" So my own answers to him were varied, but I basically described that his experience of dissociation is temporary and that to some extent you are making that choice to have that experience of just being a witness, but you then come back to the normal state of everyday life where you are making free will choices almost constantly. Yes, perhaps in the state of like point consciousness, for example, you aren't interacting with anything, so no choices need to be made, but you can't stay there. And as soon as you start interacting with something else, like another IUOC, you need some sort of a VR interface to communicate with and express your inner quality through the choices you make. But he does make a good point that we can get a bit lost identifying with the VR interface and data stream. Some thoughts are my own, but some aren't. Perhaps will isn't quite as fundamental as pure awareness, but it is just as important, if not more so, despite only being expressed in a virtual environment. That's it.
Well, you answered his question pretty well, Michael. As you say, there's always choice involved, or he wouldn't even have started to meditate, or had the experience in the first place. There's choice is always involved in what happens with us. We're not just swept along on some larger current, and things happen to us, and they have nothing really to do with our choices. Very seldom is life like that. Typically, if you put yourself in that sweeping drama that seems to carry you away, well, you put yourself there. Now, it was a choice to connect to that. It was a choice to be a part of it. So yes, it was always choice. But just like you can walk into a room full of people who are having conversations and not say anything, that's a choice. Just to not say anything, to just watch, just be an observer. And that's basically what he's done when he is in that observer mode. He chooses to not make choices. So that itself is a choice. And partly people generally choose that and just kind of stay in observer mode because they don't understand the bigger picture to what all choices they have. They don't know that they have any choices. They're just kind of overwhelmed with the idea, here I am in a room full of people and I don't really know what's going on. I'm just going to listen and watch. And that's kind of the the choice to listen and watch is kind of the first choice people make when they disassociate. But in time, you realize that you can carry on conversations, you can connect, you can make other choices other than just to be an observer. Those are available whether you choose to do them or not. So I would say there's probably lots of people who feel like when disassociated, they have no choices just because they don't know the choices are there. You know, it's like the concept of decision space. Decision space is not all the choices you have, it's just the choices you know about, just the choices that you're aware of. So his decision space when he is no longer in this reality is just very small. But that also is by his choice or his lack of making a choice, his choice not to make a choice, you know. So yeah, it doesn't say anything about the lack of choice or the lack of free will.
Maybe it just
Just
feels
silence.
simpler. Maybe it just feels simpler to him. So maybe that's why it feels
Yes.
more fundamental.
Well, in the beginning, that's what we tend to do. Just imagine if if you teleported and you found yourself in a room full of people and you didn't know any of them, and you're not sure how you got there. You're not really sure what you were doing or what's going on. The first thing that you would do wouldn't be to jump up and down and say, "Hey, everybody, I'm Michael." Maybe if you're extremely extroverted, you might do that, but most people wouldn't. Until they get a sense of what's going on, they tend to be quiet and they tend to be observers. Once they start feeling more comfortable with what's going on, then they can choose to participate. So, yeah, it's not only simpler, but that's just generally the way you know, we approach interaction. We start off quiet, we start off listening, and then when we feel comfortable, like we have something to add, then we choose to speak up, become a part of it. So, yes, many people have that disassociation and never do anything more with it other than experience not being here. But there are lots of choices outside of their decision space that are available to them. They just don't know about it. And they're not comfortable yet. It'll come. If he continues to do this and work with it for another, 6 months or something, he will eventually break out into an interactive space, not just stay in the observer space.
Thank you.
All right, we'll welcome back our co-host, Adam Haitian. Adam's got a question.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. This question came from Caroline, and it's a good transition from what we were just talking about. Her topic is about decision fatigue. She says we have it's a cognitive shortcut that causes irrational trade-offs in decision making. So you have so many choices to make throughout the day. What about simplifying our choices, such as wearing the same outfit all the time, so we don't have to make so many decisions? And she's asking your thoughts on that, Tom, and if there's perhaps too many choices. And I think you'll have a good perspective because you say as you grow up, your decision space increases. So I can only imagine how large your decision space is and how many choices you have to make throughout the day. So we'd love to hear your thoughts on that topic.
Well, just as we said with the first question, you always have a choice as to how many choices you want to make. Do you just want to wear the same clothes every day because that's simple, or maybe you decide not to tie your shoes because you're just going to have to untie them, in the evening. Um, there's there's lots of choices that you can make that simplify things, and it's whatever you're comfortable with. It's whatever you're comfortable with. Things that matter to you and your degree of comfort with those things will make a difference as to whether you want to simplify or whether that's a must choice, something you have to explore, or whether you can just sit back and let that go on, be the observer, or only kind of interact with it in a very superficial way. It's all a matter of what you want where you are, what you think's important, what you think isn't important, how engaged you want to be, and those are all choices. So yes, there's ways in our lives that we could simplify. Sometimes we find ourselves in a rat race of our own creation, where we've got 100 things to do and not enough time to do them in. And we start, we get on that treadmill and we get running, and pretty soon we get out of breath, and it becomes, dysfunctional. We just can't do it all. Well, then it's time to sit back and say, well, let's prioritize what's most important. What is the has to do and what is the would like to do? And get your life a little more under control, so where you're not always in a frenzy, because that is not a good way to live. If you're always busy, there's no time to think. And having time to think, having downtime where you just are with yourself and you're just connecting to your ideas, that's important time. And that should be a part of everybody's life. And if you're too busy to do that, then you should probably get less busy. That contemplative time is an important space, integrating everything that's happened to you and what does it mean? What's the significance of it?
This one is on personality. And Caroline says all her life she struggled with low conscientiousness, and she keeps judging herself for it. She wishes to be different. She wants to change, she wants to be more agreeable, to motivate her to be more conscientious. Sometimes this is bringing up fear, and she feels overwhelmed with her commitments or trying to change certain aspects about herself. And there's something she's really excellent at. She loves doing, and some parts about her personality that come really easy to her. And so she's wondering what kind of balance is there to stick to her strengths and develop those, as opposed to work on the things that are she doesn't have yet, or the qualities she feels she doesn't have yet, and how can she optimize her growth in this balance of working on the things that come easy and getting those gains, or struggling for the things that come hard and getting those they may come harder, but they're a lot more growth for her consciousness.
Caroline, you have to avoid falling in the trap where you just do what is easiest, what's most natural, and what well, I guess it's easy and most natural is probably the best thing. You can many people just do that because it is easier and it does come natural, and then they avoid all the things where they're not really very good. So you do have to stretch out for those lessons that are hard. Don't have to obsess over them, but you should be working on them, even just little bits at a time, all along. So when you talk about being conscientious, usually that means you're talking about your relationship with other people, being conscious, being aware of other people, and how you interact with them, how they interact with you. What
No,
do
it's
you
mostly
do?
no, that's not what I mean with conscientiousness. It's more like sticking to agreements, and like more on a professional basis. Like with friends, it's really easy for me. Like that comes natural. But like with work or organizing myself, it's a little bit more challenging.
Well, one way to look at it, perhaps, that will help you is that you can have more than one persona. You can have the you that hangs out with friends and feels very comfortable and just are. And then there's the you at work that, has to get a job done, only, doesn't talk about things that are divisive, is, smiling, even if you don't feel like smiling, because that's part of the, the part of the job, being interactive in a positive way with everyone, whether you like them or not. So that's a different persona that you wear. And depending on who you're interacting with, all of these personas are part of you. You just realize that when you interact as a professional at work, there's a different set of rules that you have to live by. When you're hanging out with your friends, then those rules soften up a whole lot. There's really not so many rules. You can kind of just be however you are. But being however you are is not necessarily going to be appropriate at work. Or if you're visiting family, or if you are with friends that aren't such good friends of yours, there's other people, you're in some sort of a group, then the rules that make you a positive part of that group change. So perhaps you'd like just to take that familiar part of your interactions and apply it everywhere. Just be you in all your interactions with people. That just doesn't play very well. It tends to create problems for you. You have to always look at your audience that you're with, the people you're with and interacting with, and have a sense of how you come across to them. How do you affect them? And how does it affect others? And if you have that sense, then you will automatically kind of shift gears and be appropriate in any situation. It doesn't matter whether they're good friends or a whole bunch of people that you really don't like very much. You can be appropriate in either one of those and be positive and get along and whatever. So I don't know, that's just something I guess you could practice. But being yourself everywhere, being authentic, it's not necessarily how you want to present yourself in different situations. It is what you need to be, but we tend to want to interact with people in a way that's positive for those people, in a way that's helpful for those people. So always keep in mind how you come across to others. How are you being helpful? How are you being, a positive part of the solution, which whatever group you're in, and then act accordingly. So is
Yeah,
that
that makes
is that helpful?
yeah, that is very helpful.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. So we tend to
Very
think that
much.
being authentic is what we strive to be, and we just need to be authentic everywhere with everybody. But that's not really the case. We have to think about how other people are affected by us and how we affect them and how are they thinking and feeling because of the things that we say and how we are. And then it's best if you act in such a way that any group of people in your environment, that you're a positive part of it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. But I also my question was more that about how much of my personality I can also change, because you divide, you have this differentiation in MBT with right brain people and left brain people, and I'm definitely more on the right brain spectrum. So it's always been difficult for me to get stuff done, I don't know, doing my taxes or my administration work or general just work where I have a lot of responsibility, where I have to manage a lot of things and keep everything organized. And so usually I will tell myself, okay, I gotta change. So I'm giving my all into this commitment that I'm taking, like a job, a new job. And then I feel okay, now I have this job, so I have to be conscientious and I have to be organized. And then I will try to keep it up, but it's it's always going wrong. It's always ending up in a disaster until I have to change to the next thing. And then I change to the next thing and I think okay, this time I'm gonna do it this time I'm gonna do it. So like I have a lot of life experience with all kinds of different things, which is like very adventurous and kind of fun to think back to it now. But it's also getting a little bit frustrating because I keep on letting people down because I commit to certain things that I'm really not good at, and then like I'm like trying to develop myself in, but like I already am in a position where I have to deliver, but I can't, if you know what I mean. So like I'm wondering how how much I should like maybe accept that it's just the way that is and like kind of manage the situation in that way, or how much I can really bend forward to develop those things because it's so hard for me.
Okay. I think a concept that might help you is you don't have to change who you are. It's not that you have to be somebody different. What you have to do is you be yourself, but the approach and the attitude and the kind of things you say and do need to change in order to fit the situation. So if you kind of say, "Oh yeah, I'll do this, I'll take care of that, and I'll organize this thing," and it's not really, what you want to do, but you've promised and you said, so you feel like you need to do it, well, then just do it. In other words, gather your will together and say, all right, this is not me. This is not what I really like to do. This is not expressing, the inner me, but I have this responsibility. So I'm going to meet it. I'll do the things I have to do to make it work. And pretty soon you'll be able to make that switch to being who you need to be to interact positively with other people and who you are at the core. So don't think of it, I need to change who I am. I need to be more responsible. I need to be more logical. I need to do this. You just be yourself. You are the way you are. And you probably will never enjoy doing things that are logic based or rule based because that's a left brain thing, not a right brain thing. That's okay. You don't have to enjoy everything you do. Sometimes you just have to get the job done, whether you enjoy it or not. In which case, then you kind of suck it up and go, finish the work, organize the thing. You can do anything. You're smart. You can do anything you like. You just have to sometimes do things you don't like and do them well. So be you, but sometimes the you that you are isn't what you express. That's still sitting in there someplace. And when you're hanging out with your friends, you can express it, but you don't necessarily express the you that you are all the time if you're in a situation that conflicts with that or is a problem with that. So, say if you are trying to help and you want to be positive, so you agree to do things that really now you don't want to do them. Well, if you agree, then go do them anyway, even if you don't like it, even if it is hard, even if it makes you kind of step out of yourself in order to do it, because that will grow you. It'll grow the things that you can do. It'll grow the ways that you can think. It will be good for you to do those things that are difficult and do them well. But you don't have to change who you are. You just have to change what you do and how you present yourself.
So it's not, so you don't think it's a fear-driven thing that I kind of think, okay, I should be that way. So like I'm really trying hard to become it, but it's like a good thing because I develop those qualities that I don't have.
Yes, I wouldn't think that it's necessarily a fear-driven thing. It depends on each situation might be a little different, but just those things that aren't comfortable for you, but you feel like you should do them anyway for whatever reason, then just go do them. Do them positively, do them with that smile, even though you like doing it and it's not necessarily what you want to do. Well, you signed up for it, then, you do it anyway and do it well and do it positively. So life often requires us to do things that are not stuff that makes us happy. They're not, the things that are natural to us. But if you do things that are not natural to you and you do them well, your scope of things that are natural to you will grow. and you won't be such a single focus kind of person. You'll be a person who can do all kinds of things, connect in all sorts of ways, and your abilities will grow. You'll become a more multidimensional person, not just the person you are now, just doing the things that feel good. So it's important to do that. That's part of our growth, is to interact socially. And often those social interactions are things that don't really feel that happy for us. It's not really what we want to do, but we need to do it. It's part of growth, part of expanding yourself. So it's not necessarily a fear-based thing, as it is. Sometimes you just need to do things that need to be done in a cheerful, positive way, and get good at them. Force yourself, force of will. Be good at them. Think about them positively instead of thinking about, oh, I really don't like this. Oh, why did I get myself into this? Then that's kind of being negative. So, all right, I said it. I'm going to do it. And when you do that, next time you won't be so quick to volunteer. You'll remember how that went, and it'll all it all helps you grow up.
Scott asks, I have heard you mention how conscious supersedes and is able to affect matter, consciousness. But I have not been able to find where you describe this in depth. Please, can you explain some of the aspects that you've discovered regarding this, particularly as it applies to healing? What are some of the factors and limiting factors that determine a successful outcome? What are the differences between trying to heal oneself and healing someone else?
Okay, well, the basic way that we affect other things with our thoughts and with our mind is through the process of modifying future probability. And that's just the nature of consciousness, that we have the ability to modify the probability of the possibilities. So there's lots of possibilities of things that could happen, but they all have a different probability. And we modify those. That's how we heal. That's that's how we do really anything that is affecting matter. Even if you put your little pinwheel thing, and you're doing telekinesis experiments, making a little pinwheel turn around in a closed space like a jar, so that wind currents don't affect it. That is you modifying future probability. So healing and doing any of the other things like that all have in common a few things. One, it matters how focused you are on what you're doing, how focused your mind is. So the first thing that we usually do if we want to learn how to heal, is learn how to meditate first. Learning how to meditate just gives you discipline. Disciplining your mind, disciplining your thoughts. If your mind is flying around on 10 different things all the time, thoughts coming, thoughts going, and your mind's just kind of scattered and jumping here and there all the time, then the amount of energy that you can do to, that you can create to change something is small, because it's scattered. If you can focus all of your mental energy on a very particular thing, then you're going to be much more effective. So first thing is learn to discipline your mind. That's important, so that you can keep a mind without thoughts for as long as you need to. So that's one thing. Another thing that's important is that you're very specific on what it is you want to do. If you're having a very general intent, it'll have a very general kind of an effect. If you have a very specific intent to do something specific, that will have a much larger effect. And if you, in other words, you can heal people by just saying, feel better, feel good. And that will help. They will help them feel better and feel good. But that's different than, say, trying to make sure that that tumor that they're going to have biopsied tomorrow turns out to be benign, not cancerous. That's a very specific thing. And it's not all tumors, it's that particular tumor for that particular person. So that's a very specific thing. And you can be very general and say, you're putting out energy to help people all over the world have a more positive life, peace, happiness, satisfaction. And that helps too. It does help the people in the world, but it's spread very, very thin. So you don't see a big, you don't see a big result there, but you do create a large result across lots and lots of people. So partly it has to do with how focused you are. The next thing that's important is the intensity of your thoughts. This has to be something that you put a lot of yourself into. You have to really want to do this. If you're just doing it in order to see what happens, well, you probably will have some success. But if you do it with a lot of, I don't know how to say it, a lot of focus, a lot of power, you really want to do this. So you might call that emotional energy, that you want to do it. It's important to you that this happens. So that gives you more power. Okay, so you need to have mental discipline, you need to have focus, you need to have specificity, you need to have clarity into what you're doing, and try to have that clarity, to simplify as much as possible. If you had a very vague thing like do good things for everybody, well, that wouldn't accomplish much, because what are good things? You see, that's too general. So specificity is important. So those are the things that make a difference, whether you're really powerful at healing or whether you aren't. Those are the different conditions. So everybody can heal. Everybody can modify future probability. But it takes practice and skill to discipline your mind such that you get to be very effective.
Tom?
Mostly getting effective is just practice. Yeah, go ahead,
Sorry.
Donna.
Tom, he goes on to ask, is there a rule against using this ability for personal gain? For example, within the lottery? And also, doing things such as good things such as healing someone on a larger scale, could you use this ability to, say, deactivate a nuclear weapon?
Well, some things are easier to do than others. All things aren't equally difficult or equally easy to change. It depends on the probabilities. If you want to change something that is 10,000 to 1 that it's going to happen, then you maybe are very good at this and get it all the way down to just 100 to 1, from 10,000 to 1 down to 101. You've really changed the probability a lot, but it still isn't likely to happen. It's 101 that it's going to happen. So it depends on how certain things are. So if you want to defuse something or keep a weapon from working or do other things like that, what's the probability that weapon's just not going to work? Well, it's going to be, very, very small probability that it's not going to work. It's a machine. Now it's not zero. It's not. Sometimes when people pull the trigger, nothing happens, because it just happened to be a defective bullet, or it just happened, that something breaks. So there's always that possibility, but that possibility is very small. If you took 1,000 weapons and you pull the trigger, there's not very many of them that aren't going to fire, by just some fluke. So that's a case of trying to do something that is very difficult to do. You may change the probability, but still not be very effective in making happen what you want. So now healing other people is easy because healing has so much uncertainty in it. That a person gets better is very possible. Our biology is so complicated and our medicine is so, we say, lacking in the sense that there's much that we don't know and much that we don't understand. That creates a lot of uncertainty. So healing is one of the easy things to do with your intent because there's lots of uncertainty with which you can modify those probabilities. It's not certain that this person's going to get ill, even if they're a stage 4 cancer with 3 months to live. Many times, it's still a minority, but it's not that unusual for somebody like that to suddenly just have all their cancer go away. You probably even know of people that have had that. It happens enough that it's not it's not a it's not a miracle. It's just that happens sometimes. And because we don't understand biology very well, we just kind of throw up our hands and say, well, who knows why that happened? So those things, you see, the healing is a much easier thing to do. Now, using it for yourself to win a lottery, well, that's asking the system to work against itself. When you're using it for things that are raising entropy, for things that are unethical, for things that are immoral, for things that aren't good things, that aren't helpful, things that are negative, and you're asking the system to change things, to create more entropy, to create negativity, to create advantage, to disadvantage some people and make you more advantaged, then that generally is not supported. So that it's not that it never works, it's just that it's not supported. If you're going to force that, you have to put an awful lot of power and an awful lot of energy to it. In general, the system, resists that sort of thing. Now, we know that people abuse the principle of modifying, the physical world by changing the probabilities of what will happen next, and they make people feel ill. If you can take away a headache, you can give a headache. So hurting people, that's one of these negative things. And even if you do that, you'll probably never be really good at it because you are de-evolving, not evolving. And in that process of de-evolving, you're creating more and more noise in the process, in your mental process, in your mental discipline. So yes, a person can train and train and train for that mental discipline, even though they have a negative intent, and they can do some harm. But all the training required usually puts people off, and also the system itself creates stumbling blocks and problems to make that not so likely to happen. So you can try to pick that lottery number, and I've read some cases where a person who was very good at modifying probabilities, he had picked the right lottery number 2 or 3 or 4 times, but he had never put a bet down. It's not that he got the lottery to be his number. He just said, here's what the winning number is going to be. And he was able to do that. But then when he actually went out and bought a ticket, well, it didn't work. He got all the numbers, he got all the digits right, but they were all off by one number, by one digit. So that was given to him just to say, nice try, but not going to support that. So that's typically how that works. If you're doing it for personal gain, you're in a de-evolutionary process, and it's going to be very limited what you can do.
So basically, Tom, the rules support not hacking the system. The rules support the purity of intention and also the probabilities of how much you can work with those abilities. All right, thank
Yes.
you.
Yeah. One thing I might say there, Don, is that the difference is that this larger consciousness system is not a machine. It's aware. It's conscious. Okay? And when you ask a conscious thing to do things or to allow things that are disruptive or negative, then it doesn't really want to make the system worse. It doesn't want to raise the entropy of the system. It's trying to lower the entropy of the system. So even though there's no rules that say, oh, if you do this, that'll fail, there's no particular rules there, but you're asking an intelligent, aware system to, support its own demise, if you will, work against itself. Whereas if it was just a machine, wasn't aware and conscious, well, a machine's impersonal. It doesn't matter. You can use it for good, you can use it for bad. It's just a machine. It doesn't discriminate between whether it's being used for good or used for bad. But the larger conscious system is not just a machine. It's aware. And trying to get it to work against itself is something that it's not that it disallows anything like that to happen, but it does kind of throw a damper on it, makes it more difficult.
That really illustrates the LCS's interest in evolving towards lower entropy. So that's very interesting and highlights the positive nature of what we're trying to do, of our reality. Thank you very much. Go ahead, Adam.
Okay, Tom. We have going to be kind of a combined question here from Eric and Ash. I'll start with what Eric had asked, and he's wondering about the quality of consciousness between different cultures on the planet. And so we can clearly see some cultures are perhaps behind technologically or even socially, and some cultures are much more peaceful or have different qualities about them. And he's wondering, is it true that a whole culture could have a lower quality of consciousness than an entire other culture? How does this relate when beings are choosing to incarnate within one or the other? Will high quality consciousness continue to go towards a high quality culture? Or, what are the mechanics with incarnating there? And to add in Ash's point, he sees there's a lot of negativity and he even says evil perhaps in our Western culture, the fact that there's so much exploitation and regards for only profit and money and greed in our current culture. He's wondering, is evil winning in the Western culture? So that's the kind of combined question between both Ash and Eric.
Okay.
I'll let you take it how you want.
Culture is a collective consciousness. Okay, if you take all the, think of all the consciousness of all the people that are in the culture, which may be, billion, it's all the people that see themselves as a part of that culture, think of themselves as a part of that culture. Take all of those people and each one contributes something. And also all of the people that were in that culture who maybe aren't living anymore. Culture also has inertia. It doesn't change on a dime. It is the way it is because of the way it was, 100 years ago. That's part of it too. So all of this together creates a collective consciousness for culture. And yes, some cultures can be higher quality or lower quality. Some cultures can be more violent, but most cultures are a mixed bag. Most cultures have some violence in them and some negativity and dysfunction, and most cultures have some good things in them too, some caring and whatever. So culture is really a very broad brush. It's a collective consciousness, but it contains lots of different things, some good, some not so good. In general, yes, some cultures would have higher quality than others. But as far as incarnating to that, would everybody want to incarnate into the better culture? Well, not necessarily. You incarnate with the idea of growing up, being challenged, and by meeting those challenges and making good choices, you evolve. Well, you can do that in any culture. You can make good choices and evolve in any culture. And the more difficult that culture is, then the more gain you're likely to have if you succeed. So, like anything else, if you pick an easy problem, well, you get a solution, but you don't gain a whole lot out of solving a problem that's easy. If you get a really difficult problem and you come to a solution, you've learned a lot. You get a lot out of that. So people are incarnating to grow up. Sometimes a tougher situation, it's just what they want. So it wouldn't be that everybody would want to be in the higher quality consciousness. Now, let's say you were having trouble and you had de-evolved the last couple of times. It may be smart then to try to pick that higher quality consciousness because it would help you. It's easier to make good choices if everybody around you is making good choices. It's harder to make good choices if everybody around you is making bad choices. So maybe you would pick that easier or that higher quality consciousness because you needed something a little easier. So it could work. All of that's just personal. Now, is Western culture particularly evil or negative? No, I'd say not. It definitely has some parts of it that are very negative. The the idea that money is the most meaningful thing, in your culture, that's not real helpful. It would be better if lowering your entropy was the big thing in your culture, not making a lot of money. But so yes, if you take a Western culture that is basically defined, or its power is defined by its economics, and your ability to have power within that culture is based on your resources, how much money you have to spend by power. So if you look at that, yes, Western cultures tend to be more that way, more left brain, but they also have good things too. And they're great places to learn and grow. And they have a lot of change, a lot of choices. Where there's a lot of change and a lot of action going on, you have an opportunity to make a difference, and you have a lot of growth in those places. So if you take a culture that is a very slow culture, let's say it's just agriculture, and what most people do is watch their sheep and keep the wolves away from the sheep and take the sheep out in the day, bring the sheep back at night, and that kind of defines their life. Well, that may seem like a very idyllic culture, but there's the richness in choices is not there. You see, that tends to be a repetitive culture. So you might say, well, it's nonviolent for the most part. Everybody's just getting along and kind of at a very basic level of survival. But at the same time, there isn't the richness in the decision space. So it has it's good, it's good parts and it's bad parts. And every culture's like that. It has its good points and its bad points. So Western culture, it has a lot going on. It changes a lot. Things coming, things going, a lot of action going on all the time, which gives you a very rich choice space, decision space in which to work. You can see all kinds of things. You can see dysfunctional things, which should be good, bad examples. You can learn from those and say, well, that's negative. I don't want to be like that. And you can see all different sorts of dysfunction. And that can help you grow. You can learn from that dysfunction. Bad examples are educational, just like good examples are educational. So, which culture is the best? It just depends on where you are, what you need, and, what you're trying to do. Now, Western culture has been growing up and changing. If you look at it over the last 500 years, you'll see that it's a lot kinder and gentler and more supportive than it was 500 years ago. Okay. But it's got a long way to go. Even though it has improved a lot, those improvements are still small. Evolution is a process that just takes little baby steps. And each little baby step takes you just a little bit further in that direction. So think of human beings have been on this planet for, and I guess I should say Homo sapiens have been on this planet for about 200,000 years. And there wasn't a whole lot of growth going on there for the Homo sapiens for the first, 100,000 of those years. Everything just was about the way it was last year. And next year was kind of just like it was the year before. And there wasn't a lot of change. Control, power, force was the coin of the realm. And that's what everybody wanted. Control, power, force. And we still have a lot of that, but it's not so pervasive as it was. So we're doing better. Our culture is a good place to learn. A lot of good, bad examples. It's
Right.
yeah, it is a good place to learn, a good place to grow up. A lot of action is happening in those cultures that require you to make choices because you have to live with it. You have to live with all of that negativity, and you have to do that in a positive way. Not get angry, not get upset, not become negative because of it. Those are all good challenges. So we're evolving, and I think in the next, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 decades, we have an opportunity to take a big step forward rather than just always taking little baby steps. We can do that now, and those big steps will be taken initially in the more advanced cultures. Advanced, I mean technologically, not advanced spiritually, but advanced technologically, because the thing that's going to make that happen is the fact that we have worldwide communications. So we won't have a lot of really good ideas always stay in margins because the ideas don't percolate through the culture, much less through many cultures. So we're starting to get to the point that good ideas can travel around the world within days, weeks. We've never had that before. So we have at least the possibility of growing up in big steps now that we didn't have before. And also we have the possibility of taking big leaps backwards too. But that's the way usually life presents itself. If there's a really awesome chance to succeed, there's usually also an awesome chance to crash and burn. Those two go together. You'd hardly ever run into a situation where it's all just positive. Anything you do doesn't matter. You're going to end up, winning perfectly. It's really not like that. Usually the high upsides also come with high downsides. So I wouldn't be too negative on our culture. It's a good place to grow up, but it does have a lot of negative stuff still going on that it's going to have to outgrow.
My question was less about the Western culture and more about the global statistics that there was a good summary that it is a lot of negativity and a lot of using other people. But when you actually look into the statistics, you said a statement that evil, like in a video, like 1 or 2 videos ago, that someone said it's a battle of good versus evil, and it seems like evil is winning. And then you said it wasn't because there's all this positivity, which is true. However, when you look at the statistics of the globe, not just one culture, I don't necessarily understand why you would even look at it at one culture. As you said, we're so connected that we're a planet. And, I listed out some statistics. They're very easy to obtain. The picture that I see is that there's a very well organized, very well connected, very powerful set of values that work together to perpetuate their values. And those values are ones that you would not want to be on the receiving end of, is my assumption.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was my main question is, I do see your point. The positivity is everywhere. You see light and beauty and love everywhere. Absolutely. However, there is a very well organized, influential set of players in this multiplayer game who, when you look at global effect, right? Like one new study came out that they said in around 50 years or so, they think that a lot of places on the planet won't have clean air to breathe. And then, of course, you would say most likely that, well, that offers a set of challenges, and then you have to find air filters. Everyone has to share clean air, and then there's space for growth. Sure, yeah. However, we're here now, 50 years before that happens. And so when you look at every day the effect, which way are we going? Sure, all of us are having families and friends and working and loving. There's a very small subset of people that are creating an effect that our great great grandchildren are going to have to deal with, only because we didn't make choices that put our effect as the more likely effect. And not to bring the conversation with everyone and all these wonderful people into like any negative places, but I'm sure you're aware of the statistics I speak of. And so what's interesting to me is we all claim, I'm not challenging that claim, I know we all do care, but we also all claim to care. And when you look around, there is so much going on behind closed doors, in basements, in private villas, yada yada yada. And that's my main question is, how can you or anyone say that evil isn't truly winning when these statistics that are independently verified from independent sources show that a little girl walking down the street isn't safe? The food most people eat is literally killing them. And not just them, but when you become obese because you eat a diet that's sold to you by someone who only cares about profit. Not to continue, obviously this is a big discussion, but that's my thing is, I love what everybody's doing, but it seems like we're not focusing. I feel like we're in a boat and the boat is leaking, and we know the boat is leaking. And maybe challenge that statement. Maybe the boat's not leaking and I'm just too ignorant or in a place where I see a leak, and maybe there's no leak and just calm down. But to me, it seems like there is a leak, and everyone's like, well, we'll keep rowing the best that we can. I'm like, well, that's great, but why not plug the leak? Right? So that's my question.
Okay. Well, if we look at the big picture, um, of course, everybody would agree with you that, the speed with which we were all becoming love is not very great, and that there's a lot of negative things going on. Of course, we are, what do I say? We're preschool, we're kindergartners. We have a lot of fear, and because we have a lot of fear, there's a lot of negativity in the world, and that's just the fact. That's the way our world is, and we humans have some characteristics. One of our characteristics is that we don't pay attention to a problem until it bites us.
Right.
For us to look at a problem and say, "Oh, here's a problem. We need to fix that. Otherwise, 100 years from now, that's going to be a bigger problem." And we say, "We better fix it now." Humans generally don't work that way. You've probably heard the term management by crisis. That's when, in a business or anything that's being managed, you basically wait until something's broken and doesn't work anymore and it's creating, terrible problems. Then you focus on it and try to deal with it. Whereas you could have maybe prevented it earlier on with very few resources. It might have been very easy, but now it's more difficult. So it's just the way we are. It's the level of awareness in the average human. Our awareness tends to be self-focused. Most people have a pretty large degree of self-centeredness, and they tend to want to manage their life by crisis. When the crisis bites, they notice it and do something about it. Until it bites, doesn't exist. Oh, they might intellectually know it exists, but they can't bring themselves to do anything about it because it's inconvenient for them. It's not what they want, so they'll just deny it or say, I don't know, well, that's not going to bite me till later, or it might not even bite me at all. It's going to bite my grandchildren, or my great-grandchildren. So that's just the nature of the human being. We're not that grown up yet. So yes, all of that's true. There are lots of people who are trying to maintain the control, power, and force that they have. If people, have control, power, and force, then they want to keep it because they're the kind of people that got it. They're the kind of people that want to keep it. So of course, you have those who have the most control, power, and force are trying to manage the system, or as much of it as they can, to maintain their control, power, and force. That's just the way people are. So the things you see and the things that frustrate you with, it's like the inability of people to see what the problem is and start to fix it early on. That is basically the problem with the low quality of consciousness that is typical, that is average in humanity. That's us. Okay, now, that doesn't mean that we're all going to hell in a handbasket and we're all going to end up, in a horrible space. It could mean that. That's a possibility. I've been to other reality frames, other virtual realities where that has happened. But basically, that is temporary. We learn from our mistakes. Now, we don't learn very quickly. Like, again, the mistake has to bite and draw blood first before we even pay attention to it. But eventually we pay attention to it. In the big picture, negativity, high entropy things are self-defeating. They self-destruct. They aren't stable. You can't build on them. Well, you can build, but whatever you build tends to fall apart eventually. The only thing that's really stable in the long term is love, is positive things. So here we are, a bunch of humans, mostly very self-centered. We manage our life by crisis. We look the other way and refuse to worry about things that don't hurt us right now. But it's us. So the thing to do isn't to get upset or annoyed by all these damn humans who just you know,
Right.
are too self-centered to get their act together. You have to live with what you've got. You can't, you know, evolution isn't something that takes a giant leap. It's a slow process. And as we damage ourselves, as we shoot ourselves in the foot over and over again, we learn just a little bit more. And then we find a new way to shoot ourselves in the foot. And then we learn just a little bit more. And then we have technology that lets us shoot ourselves in the foot, you know, many times a second. And we learn just a little bit more. So it just is the way it is. But eventually we'll get there. Eventually humanity will form a, you know, we'll have a world, we'll live in a world where caring and love is dominant. Control, power, force will be a very, very small, you know, minor thing. We will get there. Evolution is slow, but it never stops chugging toward that goal. Now, the one reality frame I was in where it kind of did, the negative got so great that it kind of had to spiral down, kept getting more and more and more negative in the whole, you know, the whole place until it hit bottom. And it couldn't be any more negative than that. Everybody was just for themselves, and anybody else didn't matter. You know, you could kill other people just because you wanted the stuff they had, and that was okay if you could get away with it. So we've been there ourselves, many, you know, hundred
Yeah.
thousand years ago. We were in that same boat, but we're doing better now. Well, this planet got to the place that that's the way it was. It was extremely negative. But as I've gone back to it over the years, it began to turn around because that's miserable and everybody's miserable. And then you have little radical cells of positiveness and they're living better, having more fun, and people notice. And then there's more positiveness, and pretty soon it starts growing again. So if you think in a really big picture, all this negativity is eventually going to go away because you're in a system that evolves by lowering entropy. And all this high entropy stuff is eventually going to go away because we're going to learn little bit by little bit by little bit until we get it. So we have to accept people as they are. We can't make anybody else grow up. We can only help ourselves grow up. Other people just are the way they are. They're greedy, they're self serving, they want to control others, they reach in and grab as much of the money that's in your bank account as they can figure out how to do it. You know, that's just the way it is. So that's the state of humanity. And we accept that and learn to live positively with it. Continue to educate, continue to point out things that we need to do better and how we need to do them better. And by that constant little growing, a little bit at a time, we'll get there. So we will make it. We will make it to that place where love is the dominant feeling. But will that take us another 10 millennia? Or will we get there in the next 10 decades? Or I don't know. But now we do have a possibility of taking some bigger leaps forward that we didn't have before because we have mass communication. People can learn. This idea of you learn, you know, you shoot yourself in the foot and then you learn from it. Well, when people can't communicate to each other, they just keep shooting themselves in the foot, you know, all over the place because nobody's learning much. They're just learning ones and twosies. But you have mass communications like we have now, millions of people can learn. At least they have the possibility that they can learn. So it's just that, you know, that possibility means we might just start growing up much more quickly than we have. Don't see a whole lot of evidence of it immediately today, but I see the trends. Let's say, go back 500 years, I can see the trends are positive. We are growing up. So don't have a negative attitude because of all the dysfunction that you see around you. Have a positive attitude that we humans are, you know, evolving. And it's a slow process. People are the way they are, and you need to be able to live positively with it rather than get angry and upset by it.
Right.
Because if you get angry and upset by it, you become part of the problem, not part of the
Right.
solution. And as long as the people who are positive, show that positivity, it's going to grow because positivity goes someplace. It has value. Negativity only has value for that person. The person who's lying, cheating, and stealing maybe gets more money, but ends up miserable just the same. Has $100 billion in the bank, but is miserable. And eventually all that will show, and people will understand that control power force is not the thing that we should all be striving for. So be cheerful, be happy, look at the world, be positive. Then you're part of the solution, not part of the problem. And it just is the way it is. There's nothing we can do about that. Everybody just has to grow up from wherever they are in their next tiny little step that they make. So that's how you have a positive attitude, even if you're in a sea of dysfunction. You just have to accept that dysfunction is the way it is. That's as much as we have evolved up to this point. And we just have to do better. But it'll take some time. But hopefully it'll go faster now.
Thank you.